VocalEye Almost Live Zoom, on time, hosted by Amy Amantea, with special guests Emmy Wall and Sarah Wang.
So a big welcome to this VocalEye Almost Live event. My name is Amy Amantea. I use she, her pronouns. I'm the Associate Director here at VocalEye. I'm your host for these Almost Live events, and I'm a proud member of this lovely blind community who joins us week after week in this space and always shares such loving thoughts about themselves. And we care so much about each other in this space that you really all feel like family to me. And I just want to extend a big thank you to you all because you've all supported us. You've all made contributions in various ways, some by making testimonials, some by helping us purchase or making donations and helping us sell 50/50s and purchase 50/50s and coming to our fundraisers, signing up for our newsletters. There's all sorts of things that you can do to help support the organization. And we greatly appreciate all of the support that comes our way. If folks happen to be watching this particular Almost Live on our YouTube channel, you can hit like and subscribe. We would appreciate that. And you can also check out how to support us at our website, www.vocaleye.ca. We always like to collect folks that are interested in what we're doing. VocalEye is broadcasting to you all from the traditional and unceded territories of the Coast Salish peoples, in particular the Squamish, Musqueam, and Tsleil-Waututh First Nations. And as tonight's Almost Live celebrates photography, I wanted to explore Indigenous perspectives on photography. And I wanted to just share with you some stuff that I found about photography and visual history and storytelling. So we're all aware, I think, that we've all heard of the tradition that knowledge keepers have of oral history, which is a way that Indigenous peoples have documented their traditional history through oral storytelling from time immemorial, and still to today, this traditional oral storytelling and oral history continues to happen. But with the existence of technology, there is a new movement for Indigenous peoples to document culture and storytelling through photographs. So many Indigenous stories are documented, but many Indigenous stories have been documented by non-Indigenous peoples. So as you can imagine, there are many photographers out there who are taking photographs of Indigenous folks, but they're non-Indigenous. So we're thinking about folks that are researchers, interested artists, government ministries, museums, those kinds of institutions. And this can actually do harm because the documentation can be perhaps misrepresented or diluted because it doesn't have that same cultural lens. So there's this article that I found in The Guardian, and it's called Indigenous Photography, a resource for visual storytelling in pictures. And I'll just read you a part of it. So it says, Natives Photography began in 2018 as a database of Indigenous visual storytellers from across North America, providing a resource for those wishing to hire more inclusively. Since mainstream narratives historically have been largely in the hands of non-Indigenous peoples, non-Indigenous people. So relaunched as Indigenous Photography, this site expands into a global community of photographers who seek to bring balance to the way stories are told about Indigenous peoples through an Indigenous lens. So there's this website that they're talking about. Of course, they don't list the website, but other than to say its name, which is a rebranding called Indigenous Photograph. And this is a collection of photographs that are done by Indigenous folks in order to capture cultural history through pictures, to archive, to express, to show struggles, to show change, to highlight climate change, and to emphasize how that has changed over time. So they're using this medium to archive a lot of things in Indigenous histories and how it relates to Indigenous peoples today, and from a global perspective, which I thought was really interesting. So as we were celebrating photography, I thought I'd share this in part, this article that I found in The Guardian. Welcome to this Wednesday, April the 24th, 2024. On behalf of VocalEye, we greatly acknowledge the support of Metro Vancouver's Regional Cultural Project Grants Program for making our descriptive tours possible this season, online and in person. So tonight we offer you our almost live event, number 151, on time, highlights from capture photography, festivals, feature exhibitions. That's a mouthful. All that to say, I'm going to invite Emmy Lee Wall into our space, who's the executive director, just to give us a little bit of a background on Capture Photography Festival. So, welcome, Emmy, to the space. It's been a year since you've been here.
Yeah, it's been a full year. It's nice to be back.
It's lovely to be back. Lovely to have you in the space as always. Tell us a bit about this festival. How long has this festival been running? Who started the festival? What's your involvement in the festival?
Yeah, so we were founded in 2013 by Kim Spencer Nairn, and this is our 11th festival. She founded the festival because there's so many important and really, culturally significant lens-based practitioners living and working in Vancouver. So we have a group of photographers known loosely as the Vancouver School of Photoconceptual Photographers that are very internationally renowned. And she just thought it would be such an important thing to do to celebrate our own. There's a comparable photography festival in Toronto called Contact Photography Festival. And she sort of consulted with them and modeled capture after them. And we similarly do a lot of exhibitions, public art projects. We produce a catalog, we do talks and tours like this one. But it's really evolved, and we're showing a lot of international artists this year. And my position is executive director and chief curator. We're a small organization, but we do quite a lot in the span of April, which every year the festival happens in April for the span of the month.
For the span of the month. Okay. Boy, do I know the theme of small but mighty.
Yeah,
Right?
exactly.
I'm gonna, so in terms of the mighty, I mean, and you've got this festival that goes for all of April, and I'm wondering about like where the venues are, because there's got to be many different venues that people can visit different exhibitions at. How many exhibitions roughly? um I mean, you would know exactly for this 11th year, but so give me kind of a contextual idea of how large a festival this is.
So we have four featured exhibitions. So those are ones that we've either worked on directly or we have a close relationship with the institution. So one is at the Polygon Gallery and it's called Pussy Riot. It's definitely a must see. We have a featured exhibition at the Pendulum Gallery, which is the one that you'll be discussing tonight. And then one at the Audain Art Museum in Whistler called Otherwise Disregarded, which features the work of four Vancouver-based artists. And then we also have one at the Contemporary Art Gallery featuring the work of a filmmaker called Diane Nguyen. And then we have 23 or 24 selected exhibitions that are submitted to us by various organizations, art galleries, commercial spaces, and that process is juried, and then the jury selects the 24 selected exhibitions. So let's say there's around 28, 29 exhibitions in total, and then we have public art projects. So those are on billboards, they're on Canada Line stations around the city, and also into Richmond. And then we do talks and tours, events, and then we have our catalog, which is quite it's about 130 pages, and it's available free of charge, both online and at various venues.
Okay. So just to sort of break this down, if folks aren't aware, or not everybody goes to exhibitions and knows what that term means, but because tonight we're going to do highlights. So we've got 6 photographs to share, but an exhibition could have anywhere from 1 to, I don't know, 100 photographs in it.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think that, we even consider a public art projects exhibition. So it could be
Right.
as simple as one billboard that, is it actually we mount projects on advertising spaces. So physically on an advertising billboard, we basically crop the photograph to actually fit that format. And it's a wonderful way to encounter art in an unexpected place. And it's also very accessible because there's no charge, obviously, to go buy a billboard in a public space. So a lot of what we do, actually, the great majority of what we do is actually free of charge because accessibility is a huge part of what we're trying to promote. We really want to make sure that our projects are available to anyone, you know, even people who can't necessarily or don't necessarily want to pay to go into a space where there's a charge.
Mhm.
Um, And then, yeah, I mean, but I've also worked on exhibitions that, not currently for Capture, but I used to work at the Vancouver Art Gallery, and one time I worked on an exhibition that had like 356 objects in it. So
Nice.
it can really run the gamut, and it doesn't mean more is necessarily better. I think meaning is made in the encounter between the viewer or the audience and the object, the artwork. And so you can have a really significant experience, just on this described tour, listening to what Sarah will share, which I listened last year and I learned a lot myself. So
Yeah, we always say in the space that good access is good for everybody. So, if you learn some things and you're like, oh, I never saw things that way before, right? Or that kind of thing. What has been kind of a highlight for you this festival season?
there's a couple billboard projects that I really am excited about. So we worked with a kind of an emerging photographer called Ariel Bob Willis, who's based in Los Angeles, and she's actually primarily known for her fashion photography. So she shoots for like UGG and Van and Hermes and all sorts of fashion brands, but she also has an artistic practice. And she looks a lot towards painting. So, like the kind of colors in painting, the surreal forms in painting, and she translates that into photography. And those billboards are along East Hastings, and they just kind of stand out and as these like glorious, colorful, really beautiful photographs on these billboards along East Hastings. And then there's this other suite of billboards along the Arbutus Greenway, which is at Fur and around 6th, just along that walkway there. And it's a group of photographs by an artist called Farah Al-Qasimi, who shot the Arab American population in Dearborn, Michigan, which apparently that population is quite large in that city and makes up almost 50% of the population as of the last census. And just like really kind of, as you were talking sort of about, people photographing people from different communities. I feel like she did a really sensitive, kind of poetic job of humanizing people that sometimes can be viewed as other, when in fact they are the majority of the population in that city. So that's also a really nice project.
That's cool stuff. How's planning going for next year's festival? Because I know this one's not done yet, but it's
It's
almost done.
yeah,
You
it's not
probably
done.
get very little time off before
Yeah,
you
to be
start thinking about.
honest, we already have started planning the next
Yeah.
festival because, especially with projects, for example, at the Gordon Smith Gallery, we'll be doing a project in 2025. It just takes kind of long lead times to think through themes, do studio visits, make sure artists have enough time to create their work. So we already have a theme going, and we already have, we've already done a lot of research and visits with artists. So, yeah, it's going well actually. But I'm trying to kind of not think too much about
Yeah.
it until May. Yeah.
Well, good for you because May will be on our doorstep soon. I know you have to jump off because you have another engagement, but you'll be back with us.
Yes,
And
I'll
if
come back
folks have
for
some
follow-up.
questions
Yeah,
at the Q&A, we'll
for
bring you
sure.
back in.
Okay, thanks so much, Amy. I
Thanks,
look
Emmy.
forward to this. Okay, bye.
Awesome. We'll bring in Sarah, um, who's going to be our guide through this process.
Oh,
Welcome back,
hi,
Sarah.
hi, Amy.
How are you this evening?
I'm great and
Great.
very excited.
I know we always see you with two different hats in this space. You're here either here with the Writers Festival, so last time you joined us for the Literary Cabaret, or you're
Yes,
here with capture photography. So
yes.
it's great that you wear both of these hats and bring us all the information. It's really lovely that you know so much about both of these topics. Because
Thank
I
you.
know so little about both of these topics.
Oh, no, no, no. I try my best.
So, Sarah, what is your involvement with the Capture Photography Festival?
So, I am their TD assistant curator of engagement. So, TD Bank funds this position. So, thank you to TD. And the role is to just basically make sure that whatever is curated by Emmy and assistant curator Chelsea, and what we include that is curated by others from other institutions here in Vancouver are just getting the most audiences, right? The most diverse audiences. We try to make sure that we reach out to different demographic groups and just try to make sure that everybody is having a great time in April, and offer something for everyone. So I am kind of, I would say, like more of the point person for some of these activities, and my job really gets really busy during March and April when we're actually live, right, with all of our activations. So yeah, I feel like I'm kind of a bridge between the public and the organization.
And have you been to all of the different exhibitions? Have you had a chance to go to them all?
I have not yet, and I have one more week to fill in these gaps. I'm gonna be really honest. It's like when you work on these projects, it seems like you have so much time, right?
Yeah.
And you know, a festival month in my hand, I'm always like, that is a long time. That's many, many days. And then now we're at the end of the month, and I still have a lot more on my plate. So I'm really going to, I think, use my time wisely this weekend and next week for the capture specific things. Some of the other partner or organizations, their events will run longer. So I actually have all of May and June for some of them. But in the spirit of the festival, I have this 1 week left. So
Got
yeah. Mm-hmm.
That's a lot. I'm sure you'll be
Yeah.
happy to get yourself a good rest afterwards, and then pick up again and run with the ball.
Yes, for
Yeah,
sure.
you'll have to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Is there anything so far before we jump into some of the highlights we're going to share tonight that you've experienced that's already been like very cool?
Um, can I ask for this particular exhibition or from anything this month?
From anything, or you can think about it and you can tell us when we do our Q&A later, whatever.
Okay, I mean, I think I'll say for right now, one of the really, really cool things that I experienced was that exhibition in North Van at the Polygon that Emmy mentioned at the beginning. I've waited for this exhibition for a very long time. It's on the Russian art and dissident group Pussy Riot. And, you know, for them to just come here and have such a great reception was incredible. And you know, when I was in that space, I'm gonna be really honest and say, did I wish that everyone was there? Yes. Did I wish that I could also have that space alone? Yes, because it was crowded. There was heat everywhere, you know. But it's really good to see that people are getting really, really excited about art again, and to see everybody out is also a really big deal because, of course, the pandemic has shied us away, I think, from coming together. So that was just really nice to see the community.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So what are we going to witness tonight, Sarah?
So we are going to have some highlights from, as you said, one of our featured exhibitions called On Time. There's 8 art like 8 art groups. There's 9 artists. The reason that we say 8 is because 2 of them work as one group. So from these 8/9 folks, we took out 6 images as our highlights, and we're going to talk about them. And I'm just going to say this year, every one of these resonated with me. So I'm really, really excited. Yeah.
Awesome. Okay. So are we ready to show some images?
Yeah.
Jump right in? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Our image descriptions were generously written by our very own Steph Kirkland, and she's going to read those image descriptions for us this evening. So you will all hear Steph's voice tonight. Let's get Rick to bring up the sit down in a PowerPoint slideshows for ease of us to transition from photo to photo. But Sarah's going to read the little caption, and then Steph's going to come in and share the description, and then Sarah and I are going to talk through all the fun curatorial stuff.
Okay, so we're going to talk about our first image here. The artist's name is Sungseok. The name of the work is Historic Present 020. It's from a series of works called Historic Present. This work was made in 2010. It is what is known as a chromogenic print as the specific medium of photography. The dimensions are 71.12 centimeters, which I will convert to 28 inches in height. So that's about the average arm length between your shoulder to your fingertip. The width is 88.9 centimeters or 35 inches, and it's usually your leg length. So between the middle of one's hips to the sole of the foot. And the courtesy is from the artist who generously provided us with this work. And I believe Steph will come in with our description.
Hi, thanks, Sarah and Amy, and welcome everybody. Thanks for being here. Just to position myself as the describer of these photographs, I'm a white settler and I'm describing these photographs from a non-expert perspective. I'm not a photographer, I'm not a visual artist, and I've only viewed the photos on my computer. I didn't get the chance to get to the Pendulum Gallery and see them actually in the exhibition. So with all that in mind, this first photograph is a contemporary urban landscape, a cityscape at dusk. The photo looks like it's been taken beneath an overpass. There's the curve in the top right corner and a column on the right. And the pavement in front of us has sort of non-parking stripes that curve out towards the curve, to the curb. And in the mid distance, there's a massive stone arch. And behind it, a cluster of office and apartment towers that form the skyline. The streetlights are on, shop signs on, and the businesses, most of the signs are red and white. They are in the distance, and above them, the sky shades from a deep lavender to a soft pink at the horizon on the left. Placed on the pavement in front of us, on those non-parking stripes, is a portable projection screen on a metal tripod stand. The square of the screen glows with a black and white image that's projected on it. And this partially obscures the view of the massive stone archway that I mentioned in the middle distance. The image on the screen has been perfectly aligned with the arch so that the arch appears complete, with half of it in the present day twilight evening and the other half in the black and white world of the past, of this past photograph. So in this on-screen image, there are two large square plinths about the same height as the stone arch and about the same distance apart. There's a sparse bit of fencing in the foreground of this photo, and it gives sort of a suggestion of a construction site. And in the background, there's a low cluster of single-story structures with what appear to be thatched roofs. And this cluster of dwellings or structures gives way to a rough, scrubby hillside and a mountain ridge. And this mountain ridge in this past photograph is completely obscured by the present day city skyline in the surrounding photograph. That's it for my description.
Thanks, Steph. Okay, that was really cool because when I first looked at this, I had no idea how to make sense of it.
Yeah.
But this idea of the arch, so this idea of the old photo that we kind of look at on this projection screen against the actual landscape.
Yeah.
If you were walking by this at night in the city, you'd see this projection screen.
Mhm.
And then you would see that it kind of lines up with the photo edge of the arch lines up with the real edge of the arch,
Right.
the life, and you're seeing sort of the past and the present, how it was and how it is.
Right. Yeah, I mean, sorry, this is Sarah again. To jump in. I personally love it when lines like they match up and they converge, right? And yeah, and this work is just so potent historically, which I know we'll discuss, but it's almost like, where do I look? Do I look at the now? Am I being transported over 100 years back? Is it actually the same, is it the same location? How can it look so different, right? So I just have so many questions when I'm immediately being in front of this work.
Do we know the answer to these questions? Because I assume that the past photo is a genuine photo, but I suppose
Yes.
it could not be.
Yes, so the photo, the black and white photo that is within this projection, right, is a old historical, basically an archival found image that Sungseok, the artist, was able to get, and I'm guessing because of the size, he had to zoom zoom in, just make it very large, so that when we're standing in front of it, it's life size, right? It's what you would actually see in the square that we are in now. And yes, it is of the same place, right? It's almost like a immediate compare and contrast to what this exact spot looked like over 100 years ago and what it looks now. But because of the way that he lined the projection so that the architectural and the skylines still sometimes merge, it shows you that yes, we are in the exact spot, and yes, a lot has changed.
A lot has changed, but some things I guess are similar because that
Mm-hmm.
archway still
Right.
exists for over 100 years ago.
Right. So part of it is still there. Part of it is not there anymore. And what I love about this is that it forces you to ask yourself, right? Has the meaning of what has stayed still stayed the same as well? So you have the monument. What does it mean now? So I think that's really lovely.
You have the monument. What does it mean now? Do we know what it meant 100 years ago?
Yes. So if I could just bring us back to what Steph said, right? So we have an arch, and then we have these two like plinths. So they're like columns, basically, that are in front of this arch. It's no longer there in today's world, but the two columns are there in the old projected image that we see.
Right.
The reason that these two plinths are no longer there is actually because they built the arch. So let's start at the very beginning. We have these two columns. The columns are the first things that were built there. So they were built the earliest. And those plinths, and please forgive me for my pronunciation of the Korean name, is called the plinths of Yonggyeongmun Gate. And these plinths are basically made as a tribute to the imperial Chinese diplomats that used to go over to Korea. So immediately we have a sense of the international relations between these two states, right? So they were built as basically, a commemoration, a thank you, right? A tribute. But then the arch that still stands now, so we see half of the arch in today's world, half of the arch that is in the old projected image. That is what is known as the Dongni-min. It's in English, we call it the Independence Gate. So that was built afterwards. It was built in around 1898. And why it was built was because the Korean regime at that time was the the Korean Empire. And they built that because they wanted to say, we are independent now. We don't want that much influence from China anymore. So in this historical image in the projection, what we see is a shift in political alignment. You have the even older world of, yes, we are really great friends, and we accept and celebrate, right, the influence of the imperial Chinese state. But you're seeing a switch from that ideology into, no, we are an independent Korean state. So it is an image of a transition. When you look at that in the sense of, we also have the contemporary photograph, right? We can then assume that since 1898, when the arch was built, over 100 years after that, Korea has also been through so much history. And we can only think about the transitions that they would have eventually as well. So it's just layer upon layer of meaning, which I really love.
That is super cool and brings a whole other, like, again, the whole context of this being like the switch in a political change
Yeah.
is not something I would ever know. And I wonder about like the average person that walks by this. And I suppose I guess people that live in this area know this, maybe.
Yeah. I wonder, because I have never been to this part of Korea before, but I wonder if, because the plinths were erected because of a tribute, I wonder if they actually had writing on it. So folks might, if you walk around it, they might know that this has, a context with Korea's relationship with China. But again, because you're right, these two plinths don't exist anymore, right? The only thing that we can see is the gate itself. We know what the gate means, but I also wonder how much people look back and think, okay, well, the gate also came after a certain point, right? So I wonder if there is any written plaques or inscriptions that would definitely be helpful. But you're right. Once we walk past this place, how much do we actually think about the past?
Probably not a lot. I mean, I think about it even walking around my local streets
Mm-hmm.
and how often I think about what could have been here 100 years ago, or I guess what wasn't here
Right.
100 years ago. And there's a couple of restaurants here on the North Shore that have like photographs of like old photographs of what the North Shore looked like.
Right.
And you're like, oh, what is that? Oh, is that part of where the lions get, like, oh, where is that area? And you're asking yourself because it looks so different than what you know it looks like today. And I find that to be super fascinating.
Right.
But I've never seen them like close together, to like layered, so that I can see what
Right.
the now and the then looks like. So this is really fascinating to me, and how they've layered it
Yeah.
to make that statement. It's like a trick of the eye.
Yeah, for sure. And I also wanted to add that when Steph was describing this, right, Steph actually also described another layer. So yes, we do have the plinths that came first. We see this transition between the plinths, so the towers, right, with the gate or the arch. But
Mhm.
Steph also says in the contemporary photograph, if you even look further into the distance, what do we have? We have a cityscape of residential and office buildings.
Right.
So yes, they might not technically be monuments in the historic sense, but you're seeing other things being erected in the city as well, right? So it's just it really talks about how a city develops, right? It's almost like a layer after another layer. So a part of me is like, how much of the history will remain? I think in Vancouver, like you say, we do have some historical monuments, but not a lot as compared to some other parts of the world. So we're not always used to seeing things that are hundreds of years old.
That's right. Our history is not that old
Yeah.
compared to some
So
other places. Yeah.
yeah, I love it.
Yeah. Anything else you want to share about this photo?
Yeah, I will say that one thing that's very poetic for me is when Steph talked about dusk. And
Yeah.
dusk is a transition point itself, right? It's a transition point where one day ends and another one is about to begin. And this is like one historical period is ending and another one is beginning. So I think that comparison and parallel is really beautiful in this work.
It's so great to have you here to help pick out some of the symbolism that my eye doesn't see. One, because I miss the details of how this stuff is layered, but also just because I don't know photography art maybe the same as you do, and so I really love having the perspective of you being able to help pull some of these details out, because it totally changes for me what it is that I'm witnessing and what it is that I'm experiencing.
Thank you so much, Amy. Yeah, I also really appreciate Steph's descriptions as well, because again, it helps me also to look in different ways.
Yeah, absolutely. Very cool start. Any other thing you want to add to this one, or are we ready to move on to image number 2?
Yeah, what I'll say is that this is one image that we took from the series. In the actual exhibition, we have 3 images, and each one talks about a historic monument somewhere in South Korea now. So yeah, all very, very layered and all very amazing. But yeah, I'd love to start with this as well.
Awesome. I love it. Okay, what have we got next? Rick, you want to bring up the next image for us?
Yes. So the next one is, I will read the image credit. So the Artist's name is Gabi Dao. The name of this work is called Sensation Association, and it's also from a series. The series is called Small Fates, Big Feelings. This particular work was made in 2023. The medium is Xerox color copy paper and custom perfume formula, which we'll talk about more. The dimensions is 23 inches in height, so that's an average length, I guess, between the hips to the knees. The width is about 16 inches, and that's about between your elbow to your fingertips. And the courtesy of the work is from the artist and the gallery called Unit 17. And Steph will give us the description.
Thanks, Sarah. This one is an abstract photographic collage, and I've kind of narrowed it down to 3 repeating elements that I'll describe for you. The one is an orange fruit-like object with a single green leaf, a human hand, and white scraps of paper. So the orange fruit resembles a peach or mango in color. It's a mix of deep yellow and amber tinged with dark reddish orange, but it has an unusual shape. It's, instead of being round, as you would expect a fruit to be, it's oblong. So it's wider at the bottom than at the top. The sides are plump and curved, and the corners are rounded as well. The single leaf on top also looks unnatural, like a flick of bright green paint. The hand element, it looks like it's emerging from a dark abyss. The palm is flattened as if pressing against a pane of glass or a sheet of ice. The fragments of white paper include a graph with arrows radiating from a center point in all directions. And a smaller fragment of the graph, in a different part of the collage, shows one arrow with the label fruity. A used fragrance strip is also included. It's white and it's inscribed with a handwritten note that reads, "What?" ? Sensation, arrow pointing to association. So all of these elements are assembled in layers, and the images repeat in different sizes, and some of them are torn fragments or partially torn fragments with their white torn edges clearly visible. So the overall effect for me is like a scattering of orange peels or flower petals swirling with a few floating bits of paper, and then below all this, a hand emerges from the dark depths, pressing against an invisible barrier. That's my take on it. Back to you, Amy and Sarah.
Thanks, Steph. Yeah, I love collage. For me, all I can say when I look at collage now is it's just messy, but in like the most beautiful way, because it seems to me almost like there's no rhyme or reason to how it's scattered. Right? And so for me, I feel like when a person looks at it, everybody's mind's going to go to a different thing.
Right.
That's the idea of abstract, is like you might find one part of it more interesting than another, or more symbolism in one thing than another. What do you see when you look at this, Sarah? And what's the meaning that you pull out of something like this?
Yeah, I'm going to say that when I was looking at all of the works of the artists in this exhibition, when I got to Gabi Dao, because again, it's abstract, right? I immediately said, oh, I don't quite understand what's going on here. And then when I guess read about it more, looked at it more, and contemplated about it more, I realized that this image for me talks about almost every other sense than vision, which is interesting, right? Because a lot of times when you look at photography, it's so vision centric, yet this work just does the complete opposite. I can definitely understand the touch, right? The taste, the smell, even the sound of this, because of what the artist just discusses and how they experience it as well, which I know we'll talk about more. But yeah, but I usually, again, when I think of collage, I think of vision as the center of it, but this really, really, it decentralizes that.
And that's so interesting to me too, because for me,
Mm-hmm.
the hand image that Steph's talking about coming from the abyss is in a black background. So
Yes.
there's a lot of really high contrast elements for me. So the
Right.
orange is really bright against the black
Right.
and the white. So there's a really lot of high contrast. So when you have partial,
Right.
some of this sticks out really vibrantly. That doesn't mean I can put all the pieces together,
Right.
but the colors stick out really vibrantly.
Oh, that's really, really interesting. Yeah. And like you say as well, like comparing this work to the first work that we talked about, it also it's literally it's layering things,
Yeah.
right? So the layering comes back. But what's interesting that I wanted to just note here is you might remember when we were talking about the image credit, we talked about custom perfume formula. Where does that come in, right?
Right.
So when I read that, I was like, that is so cool. So I don't know if we want to discuss more about that, but yeah. So the artist has another job, and their job is perfumier. So they actually mix their own perfume. And when they were making this work, they splashed some of this perfume on there. And there are some stains, like there would be like oil stains on some of the ripped pieces of paper here. And I'm guessing there would be some of the perfume on the perfume strip, the fragrance strip that was part of Steph's description, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what's interesting is, first of all, that's great, but I can't smell it, right? Like this is a photograph, it doesn't really translate. So I can't smell it. But then I think about it a little bit more, and smell is one of the most volatile senses. It's one of the ones that it's so hard to capture, right? The minute that a smell is released, it starts to dissipate. That's just how the chemistry of smell works. So what Gabi really wanted to do here was try to get these very fleeting sensations to be captured in this work. And when I talked about sound as well, the reason that I feel like this work has an acoustic nature to me is the fact that a lot of the pieces of the papers are torn. So you can see the ragged the edges, and I could just hear, right, them tearing it and rearranging it, and Xeroxing it as well. So there's a lot of really, really cool non-visual aspects of this work.
So if we break apart the layers, let's just talk about the layers in specific, Sarah, if we can.
Yeah.
Because obviously to collage it and take a photograph of it, there are these layers. And one of the layers is this. This is going to make me chuckle, and I don't mean it to be like rude or obnoxious or anything. But I remember being like a small child in my dad's office with a Xerox machine, and the thing that kids wanted to do was like sit on it and make a picture of their butt, right?
Yes.
That was the thing. But this is the same idea with the hands.
Yes.
Right? You put your hands on top of the glass and you hit the Xerox machine, and it takes a picture of the palm of your hand. And then so now that you've got that, you rip it apart.
Right.
So some of these pieces of paper might have a bit of the full hand.
Right.
Some might have partial fingers. And once you've ripped these pieces apart, you kind of scatter them and layer them. And then you add other things. So how are these things added? And what is this orange stuff? Do you know what that is?
I also think that it is possibly a fruit. It definitely has a fruit shape, right? And a symbolism. But I feel like it must be paper as well. So it might be like a drawing of it. But back to what you said about the hand, I really, really love that, because yes, like we know as kids when we press our hands, right, or our face onto a Xerox machine, like that, it's direct contact with the machine. But
it's so warm. Yeah.
Exactly, right? And then it sticks.
Yep.
Yeah. So what I really love about this hand is that it almost feels like we're looking at it from inside the Xerox machine. The hand, yes, it's underneath all of these other layers, but the way that the hand is suggested here, it feels like it's hovering above us. It's ghostly in that way. Like when
Yeah.
I was looking at it, I felt like it was like a ghost or an apparition of the artist. And what's really interesting is a lot of the times the artist isn't really present in the work, right? When we were looking at Sungseok On's work, Sungseok On was really, really trying to make sure that we were paying attention to the cityscape, the monument, right? Where did we get a sense of him there? But here, like we're actually seeing a physical part of the artist, right? Other parts of the work, again, the papers that are torn, the perfume that is splashed on, that's also the work of Gabi Dao. Gabi had to physically have done these things. So it's a great reminder that the artist is present. So I really love that. But I'm sorry, I feel like I went on a bit and I forgot the original question.
No, that's great. We were just
Okay.
talking about the Xeroxed hands, and I wasn't thinking about it. I was thinking about it as being, okay, I was thinking about it as being the bottom
Yes.
layer, but if you reverse in your mind and think about it as the top layer
Mm-hmm.
and the bottom layer like being as close to us as possible and things layered on top of it, like a
Mm-hmm.
reverse image, that
Yeah.
would mean that the orange stuff might be first, then the white paper stuff, then the
True.
hands. And that
Right.
in that perspective, it's a mind trick, but it means that the hands are coming towards you.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
And if I could just clarify from what I see, I actually see the interior palm of the hand. Because I see
Yeah.
the interior palm of the hand, that's why I feel like I'm underneath the hand
Yeah.
instead of looking down at the back of the hand, right?
Yeah.
The top of the hand. Um,
Absolutely.
yeah. So I was wondering if I could just talk a tiny bit more about the smell aspect.
Yeah.
Um, so what's interesting is that it might not be very, very clear in this particular work of art, but again, when we zoom out and consider the series of art that this work is part of, um, Gabi Dao now lives in the Netherlands. And Gabi went to all of these museums and did a lot of research on smell, and they found this object which is called a snuff bottle. It's basically like a tiny vase. Like when I say tiny, it's probably smaller than the size of one's thumb, right? And it's a tiny vase, and usually the vase has some artwork on the outside of it. So like maybe a drawing of a bird or a rose. But this object came to the Netherlands from China hundreds of years ago at the height of Dutch imperialism. And the snuff bottle was used as a bottle where you would just put it up to your nose and smell some perfume or oil or incense, or in this case, it would be tobacco.
Mhm.
So Gabi was really, really interested in how this small portable object had a use, which was to allow you to smell, right? But also how it moved from China to the Netherlands, how it probably carried these smells across very, very vast terrains. And thus, right, the inspiration for this work was born. So another just I wouldn't think there, but when I read more about it, it has such, again, a historical context.
Mm. Well, I mean, that makes a lot of sense that you would have a snuff bottle 100 and 200 and 300 and 1,000 years ago because, we didn't have the same kind of hygiene.
Yes.
We didn't have the same kind of way of disposing of garbage or sewage or any of those things. And so I'm sure that people of high class were walking around smelling perfumes to get other smells out of their noses. So that totally makes
Yes.
sense.
And you're exactly right, Amy, because apparently when it first got to Europe, the people who used it were upper class
Of
folks.
course.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
That doesn't surprise me one bit. Yeah. Cool
Um,
stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Any other thing that you want to add about this one in particular?
Yeah, so when I was doing a little bit more research about this, I found that, smell is one of our most underappreciated senses. And I wanted to bring two really cool examples of how smell is actually very important in some parts of the world. There is a community that lives in the Andaman Islands, and those are a group of islands in the Indian Ocean. And that community actually names their seasons and parts of their calendars based on the names of the scents of flowers that are in bloom at that time of the year. And I thought that was really, really nice. And coming back to the art world, because we've always talked about how vision is always so supreme in art, right? I want to say that a couple of years ago, at the height of the pandemic, when we actually lots of us lost our sense of smell for a while, there was a very interesting exhibit called Smell the Art, Fleeting Sense in Color that opened in the Netherlands, where they would pair Dutch Golden Age paintings with smells of 17th century canals and the odor of a beached whale. So
Wow.
you would be looking at these beautiful works of, a Dutch ship that is out at sea, right? Going to get so much trade around the world. And then you would get a whiff of what the sea probably smelled like at that time, which I'm guessing wasn't great.
So
But
you needed to have your own little snuff bottle with you.
yeah, exactly. Right. As you viewed the works. Yeah. So I thought that was really, really nice. But yeah, but again, I think this is such a great tribute to all of our other senses. And I love how we both really love the hand. The hand is so important here.
Yeah. When I was at the Van Gogh gallery
Mm-hmm.
in Amsterdam, they have his famous sunflower
Yes.
thing. And it's the only thing that they have set up in a tactile gallery. So they have the painting that's made with tactile paint, so you can touch a reproduction of the painting itself
Great.
with the frame. They also have it in kind of a raised 3D printer kind of thing on black
Oh,
black lines on white, so you can trace your fingers on that. And
okay.
they have a smell box, so you open the box and it smells like sunflowers.
Oh,
Uh,
that's amazing.
yeah, so even there they have this scent that they want you to experience, what sunflowers would smell like.
And I think that's so great because you get the smell and none of the pollen, and that's a win-win.
Yeah,
Yeah, I love it.
they did that at another gallery. I was actually at a gallery, Passchendaele,
Okay.
around the World War, um, one of the World War sites,
Mm-hmm.
where the Canadians fought. And in that museum, they had a bunch of snifter boxes, and they were
Oh,
non-toxic, but
okay.
these boxes were like, this is what mustard gas smells like, and this is
Oh,
what, right? And you're
yeah.
thinking, I mean, I wasn't around
Right.
100 years ago to experience this, 100 plus years ago to experience this, but it
Yeah.
was a really interesting sensation because folks talk about that a lot in terms of their war
Yeah.
experiences when you had veterans, when they were sharing their war experiences. And it
Right.
was really interesting to listen to the sounds of storytelling happening in the background, and to smell, and to have like GI equipment there to touch, and
Oh,
all those
wow.
things come together when you are so removed from what that period of time would have been like. So the
Yeah.
power of smell is really, well, it's really powerful.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It sounds very, very immersive,
yeah,
that exhibition.
yeah,
Amazing.
yeah. All right, shall we go on to our next one?
Sure. We'll go on to the third image. Um, And as Rick is pulling this up, I will just again note the image credit. Our artist is Aaron Leon. The work is called Untitled 4. Again, it's from a series called Altered Landscapes. The entirety of the series was made between 2013 and 2020. The particular medium here is a chromogenic print. The dimensions I have, so height is 30 inches. That's between your arm, so between your shoulder to your fingertip. Width, it's about 37 inches, and it's about between like leg length, so the top of your hips to the sole of your foot. and the courtesy is from the artist. And Steph will give us a description.
Great, thanks, Sarah. This is a landscape photo of a partially frozen lake on a sunny day. The thin film of ice appears lacy and pale blue and only extends about halfway across the lake. The exposed surface of the water is perfectly smooth and glassy, like a dark mirror. The far shoreline is lined with a dense border of golden brown reeds with white tufts of what could be flowers or seed heads. And then behind the reeds, there's a dense forest of leafless trees. What makes this scene magical is in the reflection on the lake, actually. There is a vivid rainbow-like reflection of the reeds in the water. Their natural golden brown stalks appear to be topped with shimmering layers of hot pink and emerald green that almost seem to be vibrating, which is a bit of a paradox on this glass-like surface. The blue sky is also streaked with a few clouds, and they're softly tinged with more pastel shades of pink and green. And that's my description. Back to you.
Beautiful. All right, Sarah, start by telling me what did you call it? A chromographic? Chromogenic.
Yes.
Now, what does that mean?
Okay, that is a great question. So it is basically, it's a photographic print that is made from it's made from a color negative, a transparency or a digital image, and it's developed using a chromogenic process. So basically using different pigment of ink, and yeah, it's sometimes called a C-type print as well. And it sometimes could be unstable due to color shift or fading, but it's a type of a way to print a photograph.
So does that mean when you take the photograph of the original landscape, when you digitize it or process it, you can change the colors?
So that's a really great question. I am sadly not very great at the technical aspects of photography, but because Aaron Leon, the artist here, did use different types of lenses, we will discuss why we have what Steph called this kind of rainbow shimmer.
Okay.
That is a deliberate process that the artist used, but the chromogenic print here, it uses these three colors of cyan, magenta, and yellow to create everything that you see on the image.
All right. So give us a little context.
Yeah. So so I just first want to give let's ground this with the artist first. So Aaron Leon is a member of the Swetzian First Nation. He is a photographer, but I think what's really resonant with me is that he's also a language advocate for his nation, and he's a cultural worker as well. I think this ties really well, Amy, to your introduction today, because of some of these ideas of, in the history of photography, a lot of times Indigenous folks did not have the ability to be the real subject, right, of the work. They were objectified by a lot of the early historians and ethnographers and photographers as well. What's interesting, obviously, as time went on, is that we see Indigenous artists take back this agency as the photographer, as the portraitist, right? As the subject in front of the camera. What I love about this work is we sometimes just end there and think, okay, we have an Indigenous photographer, great. We have an Indigenous person sitting for a photograph, great. But what about the landscape? So landscapes can also be objectified. Landscapes can also be a subject without agency. And what I love that Aaron Leon says is, I set up, and he's saying him, right? So I set up the camera and the land does the rest through collaboration. I allow the land to retake itself from the landscape. And I think that giving agency to the land is incredible here. And yeah, and these images, again, part of a series, are different lakes that we see in Armstrong, British Columbia, and also lakes and landscapes that we see in Montreal and Quebec. And yeah, and I don't know if that's enough for now or if we should continue to discuss some more.
Yeah. Share
Yeah,
what you, yeah, go ahead.
okay. So so he takes a medium format camera. He would find these places that he wants to photograph, and he would just let the camera, like the film inside the camera, expose the film for hours, and then he would cover the lens with three colored filters. The colors are red, blue, and green, and that's why Steph would say, "I see some of this rainbow shimmer." That comes from the lens. And you know, we've used lenses like this in photography to usually neutralize certain colors in our works. But what Leon does here is he's actually emphasizing, right, the effects of red, green, and blue, and the effects would be highlighted in the slight movement. So a wind that might have blew a wisp of the reed, right? A slight ripple in an otherwise static lake. And the color lenses would be so sensitive that they would pick these subtle movements up. And that's why we see these streaks of color, right? They're really, really magnificent here. And yeah, and I also wanted to note that the image that we see here and in the rest of his series, these are what we called constructions. So they are multiple photographs that the artist eventually would stitch into one. So the image that we see here, possibly it didn't actually exist because Leon had to have stitched multiple exposures of this one lake scene to get this one image. So again, layering comes back.
I gotcha.
Mm-hmm.
That's so interesting. I this idea of stitching photos together to me is a bit unusual.
Mm-hmm.
I like the idea because I mean, I used to think about it like when you would take a panorama of a landscape and you could only take like so much within one photograph, right?
Yeah.
So you'd have to take another photograph and another photograph and then try and stitch them all together where they lined up to make one very long photograph of a landscape.
Right.
But you could really stitch anything together to make. So, you know, all of this, it looks like a shoreline of reeds.
Yes.
From tall to small, going from right to left. And that could just be because it's going into the distance.
That's true.
But he could, I mean, that doesn't mean that all of those reeds exist, is what you're saying.
Yeah, or like the position of
Or the position of them,
the reed,
yeah.
right? Like maybe one was in this position, but the next stitch of it was a completely different time, like an hour after the first one, let's say, stood in this way.
Yeah.
And yeah, and by using the filters, I think what's really nice is that sometimes when you're looking at the landscape, you're just like, wow, it's so static. There's no wind and nothing changes, nothing is moving. But something is, right? It's those small changes that actually interact. It's the changes in the landscape that's interacting with his camera. And that relationship is so intimate. It's things that we can't even observe sometimes, right? Because of the nature of how we see and our attention spans. Yet the camera can pick it up. So what I love about it is it goes back to what he said about his work as a photographer. He says, I set it up, right? And the rest is the land. So he's really allowing the land to show, if you will forgive me for this pun, it's true colors. So yeah, I think it's beautiful. It's subtle, but as you like observe these colors, you know there was probably like a movement, right? There was probably a bit of wind, or you know, something that was disturbed, right? So I really really love it. It's very very um subtle.
And this is why a lot of this kind of work is like a trick to the eye, because
Mm,
you could never see it if you had the privilege of sight. You could never see it with your naked eye.
exactly.
Needs the millisecond that the camera shoots, and all those
Exactly.
little milliseconds added together to get just the little minute detail, and then to stitch it all together. So it's really it's a trick.
Yeah, and lots of times when folks make the metaphor of, oh, the camera is like a machine's eye, I always think, but yet it does a lot more, right? Like
Yeah.
it does so much that we can't capture ourselves. So,
Well, and this is also why photography is art, because it's not just shooting a photo.
right,
The creative person on the other side who says, "What can I do with this camera?
exactly, right?
How
There's
can I
so
utilize it?" Yeah.
exactly. I remember last year when we were discussing some of the artworks, people said, like, you know, it's so interesting how much effort and thought goes into a picture before, like, we even click a button, right? A lot of us think, oh, it's point and click, but
Yeah.
it's not. A lot of the times, it's so much work before that.
Yeah. Yeah. These aren't selfies.
Yes, no, they're not.
Awesome. Anything else you want to share about this work, Sarah?
No,
Or
I love it. I think, you know, it's,
beautiful.
we talk about landscape and the sublime a lot. And
Yeah.
this is one of those examples where I actually kind of understand what sublime means. So I'm really grateful for this image.
I'm really grateful for the descriptions and the unpacking of it,
Oh,
because
thank you.
it really, again, it changes what it is I feel like I'm witnessing. All
Mm-hmm.
that context, all the, who the artist is and what the artist aims to do, the way that Steph describes the
Absolutely.
the reflections in the water and how you parallel that with the camera lenses.
Right.
Um, because I too would think it was just a point and click, and then I'd be like, how did they do that?
Mm-hmm.
What am I looking at? Yeah.
It's so, so cool.
All right. Let's see what you got next.
Okay, so we're going to go on to our fourth image. So we're halfway done. And this one is by the artist Diane Meyer. The name is Brandenburg Gate. Again, this work is from a larger series called Berlin. This work was made in 2015. It is called Embroidered Archival Inkjet Print for its medium. And the dimensions I will say is height-wise, it is again about the length of your shoulder to your elbow. And width-wise, it is about the length of your shoulder to your waist. And courtesy of the artist and Klomching Gallery. And Steph will give us the description.
Thanks, Sarah. This photo is of an urban city plaza under a bright blue sky with fluffy white clouds. And the top half of the photo is in perfect focus, and the bottom half appears to be pixelated, as if viewing it through a mesh screen. So I'll sort of describe what I can see in the top half. The square seems to be flanked by several tall towers of glass and cement. And there's a shorter, maybe two-story building. It's mostly glass with slender gray columns, and it seems to open onto the plaza. Part of the building sign is visible in German. It's like something Damer Platz, which could be a train station or a transit station, something like that. And then the bottom half of the photo, it's exactly like halfway, the entire bottom half of the photo has this pixelated effect. And when I look more closely at that, I realize that the photograph has been entirely rendered with cross-stitch embroidery, which is creating the effect of tiny box-like pixels. In this part of the photo, there appear to be several human figures in the plaza. One might have a dog or a suitcase, I really can't tell. One might be sitting on a bench. It is hard to tell since the details are kind of obliterated and we just get the hints, the suggestions of the shapes. by these tiny squares of color. That's my take. Back to you.
Thank you, Steph. This embroidered look is a little bit how I kind of see the world in some ways. Like no details, but I can make out that those are human bodies, but I couldn't tell you, you know, facial details or skin color or gender, air quotes gender, or
Right.
like this person that may have a dog or a suitcase. We don't know
Right.
what that is, right?
Yeah.
Because you can't see the details of it. So Sarah, tell us about this one.
Okay. I'm so excited for this one because of the topic it talks about. So so this one, when I first looked at this particular work, before I even read the name and where this work was made, I actually thought this was downtown Vancouver. So this plaza eerily looks like Vancouver City Center SkyTrain station. When you come out of it, there's this big intersection where the Nordstrom was, and it just looks like that. And I thought, wow, that looks very familiar. But no, we're not in Vancouver. We're actually in Germany. We're in Berlin, and yeah, and we're at this place called Potsdamer Platz, and Potsdamer Platz is basically a plaza. On the other side of the building, we have the word Bahnhof, which is, I believe, in German.
Bahnhof is train station.
Train station, right? So this is like a nexus, right, of where lots of folks are meeting. Yeah, and as Steph said, the top half of this image is crystal clear. We have, you know, cloudy, sunny skies. We have buildings that look like mid to tall rises, and we have folks in the front who are going about their day, basically crossing the street and whatnot. And the reason why the bottom half of this image is basically stitched over, right, is because the stitching is supposed to symbolize where the Berlin Wall once stood. So the Berlin Wall, as we all know, fell in 1989. And it was a huge deal, right? Everybody was shocked. It led again to the end of a regime in a huge part of the world. So again, we're thinking about some of the themes from our first image by Sungseok again. But unlike Sungseok's work, the entire monument no longer exists in the cityscape of Berlin. The Berlin Wall was about 100 miles long. So it snaked through lots of places in Berlin. Some of them are now just apartment buildings. Others are just basically a park or a basketball court that, you know, has overgrown grass on it. You would never look at this and think, oh my God, there used to be like a partition here, right? So here, the foreground and obviously the bottom half of the image is stitched through with thread to show that it was basically this height and this wide, right? And basically this used to be an entire wall. So technically, if we were looking at this maybe 40 years ago, it would be obscured because there is a wall, right? Now there isn't a wall anymore. Diane Meyer still wants us to remember there used to be something here, right? There used to be a huge monument here. It's not here anymore. So how can I suggest it? And she suggested it using thread. And I think that's also a very interesting medium, and we'll talk about why, of course. But yeah, but again, we're looking at a cityscape, a contemporary cityscape, and boom, we have a huge chunk of history to discuss again. So I really like it.
And if we're to suggest that this mesh stitching represents the Berlin Wall, and I don't know how accurate to scale this is, but it would suggest to me that the Berlin Wall was about twice the height of an average male.
Right. And you're right. And I thank you for bringing this up. This is stitched to size. So obviously Diane would have had to take the picture first before she stitched, right? But even before she took the picture, when she was in various parts of Berlin, she said that before she even like set up her camera, she had to think about how I was going to stitch this wall back in, before I even took the camera. So when she shot it, she had to make sure that a good part of the world is still visible, and a good part can also be symbolized via the stitching and thread. So when we're looking at this image, you're absolutely right. The stitching starts and ends at scale. So it does look like at least twice the height of an average male. Yeah.
Right. Okay. Continue.
Oh, yes. So I just want to say the Berlin Wall to me is very important. Not that I was born, you know, at the time of its rise and fall. I wasn't, and I've never been to Berlin before. But I think culturally speaking, it is still a huge deal for a lot of us in the West. I wanted to bring this up because I know we have lots of theater lovers in this space, and I'm so excited to bring this up. I don't know if anybody remembers in the 1990s. We had the off-Broadway rock musical hit, Hedwig and the Angry Inch.
We did
That
a almost live of Hedwig.
Oh, I love Hedwig.
Yeah.
I originally watched the film first, but then when I read more about the play, I thought, oh my God, this is amazing. And I don't know if everybody remembers, but a huge symbol of that play, right, is that unification of the divide of East and West Germany. They sang about the wall. They had animations about the wall. I think they had like a song about the wall. So that was really, really cool. But even before the 1990s, you know, if I could go back in time, the 1980s was a time when lots of folks died trying to get from one side to the other. We have photographs of it spit upon and graffitied. 1970s, I don't know if we have any David Bowie fans in the space, but I think it was 1977 that Heroes came out. That one line that says, you know, I remember us kissing by the wall, and that was about the Berlin Wall. And of course, the most iconic symbol of this wall was when President John F. Kennedy went and said, I am a Berliner, because the wall was erected, right? So I want to say that, you know, one other historical aspect here is Potsdamer Platz itself. And lots of squares in Europe, in Germany as well, are historically quite militarized. So squares used to be for, you know, these generals and emperors to march with their triumphant troops, right? Where everybody would scream and clap and throw flowers at them when they came back from a victorious war. And while the Berlin Wall symbolized a relatively, you know, not outrightly violent war, the Cold War still was a huge divide for so many people, many of whom are still alive. And I love how war and walls and monuments are usually a very masculine thing, yet embroidery is a very feminine and domestic medium. And I also love the fact how walls, we sometimes just think, oh, you know, overnight a wall came up, and overnight a wall came down. And we usually forget that walls are also built probably brick by brick, just like this is stitch by stitch. And back to this idea of photography. I mean, how many times have photographic works, the quality of the clarity, right, break down, and things get pixelated down. The individual stitches here are also a symbol of those individual pixels that make up a photograph. So all in all, really, really poetic. And again, I never thought about textiles and stitching, embroidery, thread as anything that could be woven into a photograph. And she just blew me away, and I love it.
Do we know how she wove this in? Was it machine woven or hand woven or?
That's a really good question. When I went to Diane's website, she had some process images of her making these, and in all of her other works. She has a lot of other works where she also embroiders things on there. And she talks about choosing various threads, right? Because she has to make the thread work with the other colors of the photograph. I'm not very familiar with how a sewing machine works, so I can't visually tell if it's by hand or by machine. But I will say that if it is by hand, it is incredible. It is like a machine because like the stitching is so neat. It's so symmetrical.
It's got to be by machine then.
Yeah, so I'm thinking it's probably by machine, but still I'm sure a lot of like labor went into it.
Oh yeah, because it makes me wonder about whether what kind of paper or material the print is on. Because I would think if you were to print this on some kind of paper that it would tear once you start to put thousands of little needle holes in it.
Yeah. I mean, that's a really
Maybe
great.
printed on canvas, maybe? I don't know.
So the image credit that I have just says embroidered archival inkjet print, which,
Yeah.
when you think about it, would just be a piece of paper. I would love to see the back of this, of course. But yeah, maybe this is something that that Emmy and Chelsea might know a little bit more about. But yeah, I mean, it is not a very large work as well. Like it's quite
Yeah.
small. So again, the details that must have gone into it.
Oh, that's incredible.
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah. All right. Where are we going next?
Okay, so our second to last one, when we have it on the screen, I will just read out the image credit. And yeah, so this is by the Turkish photographer Alp Peker. The name is Patience, and again, it's from a series called I Looked in the Mirror and I Saw, made in 2023. It is archival inkjet print. And the dimensions are 57 inches in height. So that's the average length between one's shoulder to the sole of the foot. And the width is about 38 inches, which is usually the leg length, which is from the top of the hips to the sole of the foot. And the courtesy is of the artist. And Steph will give us the description.
Okay, thanks, Sarah. This is a close-up of what appears to be a young woman who has an olive complexion. Her face is upside down to us, as if she were lying down and the photo were taken from above. Her head rests on a pillow, and her brown hair is swept off her forehead, and there are some loose strands that spread out underneath her head. Her deep brown eyes gaze directly into the camera. At first, I thought her face was decorated with a white squiggle of something playful and edible, like cake frosting or maybe a spaghetti noodle. But on closer inspection, it's actually a white cord, like a shoelace, and one end is tucked into the corner of her mouth. Tiny beads of sweat are also visible on her forehead, upper lip, and chin. The white cord curls down to her jaw and snakes back and forth around one cheek, then travels across her upper lip, and then curves down and around her chin before undulating its way along the other cheek and jaw, and finally meanders across her forehead, where it ends in a bright yellow glow. This yellow glow is from the flame of a disposable lighter. The lighter is held almost completely out of frame by another person, and only their thumb and the top of the lighter are visible. That's my description.
Oh, it's like a giant candle wick.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna let you start to contextualize. Thanks, Steph. Oh,
Okay, so this image, I think out of all of the images that we'll see today is I think in portrait view. So one thing that I'll say is everything that we've seen today and what we will discuss, and almost all of the works in the actual exhibition kind of focus on the past, right? So past monuments, past history and whatnot. This is one of the works that keep me in suspense because of the fact that it is implying future. So whenever we see somebody lighting a candle or, a thread, I'm thinking of, oh my gosh, eventually the candle is going to burn out, right? The thread is going to burn and then it's going to explode. So we have this sense, like a logical sense of what's going to happen next. But again, it's not shown here. We're only shown a part of the image that implies that there's going to be a future consequence. So I think this work and in the entire series it's very intimate. There are three faces in the entire series, and we're looking at one of them. It's a pretty close-up shot, so that adds to the intimacy. And the entire series was created by Alp Peker during the period of the pandemic, which they say, was kind of a time that passed without meaning, a blank space in everyone's memory. It was also a time that they felt that it was really important to center queer identities, queer compassion, and community building that again was part of this time of a lot of stress for almost everyone, right? So whenever I see fire in Amy, I kind of feel like apocalyptic in a sense. Like it denotes a sense of the end times for me, again, because my mind immediately jumps to, okay, well, what happens when the candle is extinguished? What happens when the light bulb burns out? What happens when a dynamite is set and then it explodes, right? So but interestingly, the person who is in this photograph doesn't seem stressed at all. They actually look really serene. Obviously, they are modeling, and this is a staged photograph, but it almost seems like they're there without inhibition. So the stressed one is actually me. The stressed one are the audience folks, right? Whereas the actual participant, the subject in this series, in this particular work of art, is actually very, very at peace. So there's that kind of a disconnect, which lends to kind of the mystery in what is actually going on. And again, it's one of those that keeps you on your toes, I think.
Yeah, it kind of makes me nervous now looking at it, because I too could see sort of the contrast between the white and sort of the darker skin complexion. And I thought, oh, is this whipped cream? Is this like I was curious. But the whole reference to this idea of intended consequence and what happens when the time runs out.
Yeah.
That's totally interesting and not something I would ever think about trying to take a photograph of or trying to set up as a photograph.
Yeah, and I think Peker mentioned in some of like the interviews about this work that all of the subjects are their friends, right? So they know each other. They obviously have good rapport. But again, it's like, what is actually going on? Because Peker really wants to centralize queer experience and queer time. I do want to add in one note here that Peker is from Turkey. They, I believe, now live in Denmark. But why it's so important to center queer identity is because Turkish society does often have quite complex views on this. On the one hand, the government isn't very equal when it comes to laws for LGBTQ plus folks and non-LGBTQ plus folks. Yet Turkey actually has a very, very fecund history of supporting national artists and especially music icons who are either out or not out, right? So there's like a cultural acceptance, particularly from the younger generations, as well as some hesitancy from the government as well. So again, during the time that Peker made these works, where lots of folks were struggling, they really wanted to make sure that the queer community wasn't left out or didn't feel that they were invisible. Yeah. Yeah.
So a lot to think about, especially when it asks maybe a person to think about their own times during pandemic and
Yeah.
what future means. And
Yeah, which is interesting because I always think about this as well. Like, is the pandemic actually over? Right? And yeah, we do have some very different concepts of time during this period. And I wonder, years afterwards, how we'll look back at this time and describe it, right? So yeah. So it's nice to see that we're having works made during this time, talking about this time now that we can discuss.
absolutely. Well, I mean, we're in a climate now where it almost feels like the very beginning of the pandemic, where people were like, nah, I don't need to wear a mask, and other people
Yeah,
I'm wearing a mask, right?
yeah,
And now it feels the same. There's some people who are still, I'm wearing my mask, and other people are like, yeah, I don't need to wear a mask. Yeah, I don't need another booster. I'm good.
yeah,
So it feels tricky, and I think this is something that'll be with us for a while. And every time we
yeah,
get sick, we'll wonder: is it a cold? Is it a flu? Is it a COVID? Is it a whatever?
yeah.
Yeah,
And I really like, I mean, this might be just me being naive, but I really hope that we could say there was like a before and after, that we could actually say that this period ended, right? But it feels like you say, we're going in a circular way. Like the minute we think it's over, a new variant comes. So
yeah,
I'm hopeful,
yeah.
but yeah,
I get that.
yeah.
All right. Any
Okay.
last thoughts on this one, or are we going to take a look at our last one?
Yeah, let's move on to our last one here. And okay, so this last work is by the artist Gonzalo Reyes Rodriguez. It is called Untitled parentheses SLPHGO, and it's part of a series as well. And it was made this year, 2024. Its medium is archival inkjet print, and the dimensions that I'll say is the height is about 11 inches. That's between one's elbow to the wrist. And the width is about 14 inches, which is usually between the elbow to the palm. And Steph will give us this description.
Thanks, Sarah. So in the spirit of layering, this photograph is layered, 2 photos on top of each other. So the center photo is a portrait, and it's sort of framed by a larger photograph of a landscape. And both appear to have been taken outdoors in the daylight. So with this one, I will start with the center portrait photo. This photo shows a young man from the chest up. He's shirtless and standing in front of a tall wooden fence. There's green grass on his side of the fence and tall leafy trees on the other side of the fence and blue sky above. He's turned 3/4 to the camera. He has light brown skin and a mane of dark hair that extends just past his shoulders. His forehead is smooth. There's a softness in his cheeks, a fullness in his lips, and a hint of a 5 o'clock shadow. The bright sunlight casts dark shadows under his brows, so his eyes aren't visible. He could be looking at the camera or in another direction, or his eyes could be closed. The larger photo, framing this one, shows a wide open gate. Its large wooden doors are swung open completely to either side. One of them is held in place by a pot of pink flowers, and the other held in place by a cinder block. The gray cement pavement is cracked, and the threshold is uneven, as if a low step had been patched over. Through the gate, there is a yard as wide as the gate, with a narrow border of assorted plants, flowers, and shrubs on either side. These plants partially conceal the cinder block fences on either side, which are topped with chicken wire. So the cinder block fence might be 3 feet high, 4 feet high, and then another 3 or 4 feet above it would be the chicken wire. It looks like there's a wide path or driveway that extends through the middle of the yard, partially paved, partially paving stones. But the portrait in the center obscures the view of where this path or driveway leads. There are leafy green trees and wooden structures on the neighboring properties, and the sun is shining, but the sky is pale and colorless, unlike the bright blue sky in the portrait. And that's all I have. Thanks.
Thank you. All right, Sarah, what are you going to share about this? Because I'm interested in this layering.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the layering is especially important here because there's a very interesting backstory. So in the series of works by Gonzalo Reyes Rodriguez, all of the photographs have this like layering / framing effect. There is one photograph that is basically in the foreground, and then it's behind it is a completely different yet sometimes related photograph. So we're usually looking at two photographs for every work. And the photographs that are usually in the foreground, these are not photographs by the artist. These are actually photographs taken by a person. We don't actually know their name. But some of the photographs on the backside, they signed with a word called technor. So we sometimes just use that in spite of having a real name. So where did these photographs come from? Well, Gonzalo Reyes Rodriguez is from Mexico, and when he was in a Mexico City bookstore, he basically found the stack of photos that someone, maybe Technor, took, and he bought them. And when he bought them back to his own studio, he combined these found images, right? So these images that were already taken with his own photography. So what I really like about this is we're not converging histories or monuments anymore. We're basically converging our own narratives with a narrative of someone who lived in a past time in Mexico with some of the more contemporary works that Gonzalo Reyes Rodriguez took. The images based on dates and some of not in this one but in other ones in the series, we can date them to about 1987 to 1993. So that was a generation ago, right? So we're looking at a previous generation of Mexican youth, and they are now being used in a newer context, layered with the works by Gonzalo Reyes Rodriguez. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, I find that fascinating because before we were doing the Almost Live, I was doing some research on photographs and copyright and all that kind of stuff. And basically, to sort of encapsulate that, what I learned is that the minute the photographer takes the photograph, that is their intellectual property.
Right.
So when you have found photographs,
Yeah,
you're using somebody else's intellectual property.
Yeah.
And I wonder about how that works. You know what I mean? Because the artist has used somebody else's photograph essentially without their permission, because we don't know who the original taker of the photograph is.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, just disclaimer, I am not a lawyer.
No,
so
me neither, but I just
right?
that's so fresh in my mind. So I'm curious.
So what I say is probably not good advice in any way. but I will say that maybe what I will ask in return is, can we consider the fact that these images, right, these like older found images were being sold by a bookstore? So I wonder how they got to the bookstore, right?
Absolutely.
Right. So if it gets sold by a bookstore, does that mean that it's no longer Technor's? It's like the bookstores. Like, how did it get there? Maybe someone didn't want it anymore. I know that when I used to go to Europe and go to those flea markets, right? There would always be stands of folks who would sell photos. A lot of times it's like photos from 100 years ago.
Grandma's attic.
Right, exactly. Or like, a little girl in a portrait that you have no connection with, yet people would buy it. And there is a market for this, right?
Yeah.
Whereas most people would buy it, to let's say collect it, or because, it's aesthetically pleasing. What's interesting, and goes back to your question, which I know I'm not answering, but it goes back to this idea, well, Gonzalo Reyes Rodriguez is an artist himself, and he's using it. Right? So as you see here, this is a photograph of two photographs, right?
Yeah.
So this now becomes one work.
Yeah.
So whose work is it? It's a little Inception-esque, I will
Yeah.
say. But yeah, but I mean, one of the things, again, like I was not alive, I don't think, during the time when the original Tech Noir photographs was taken. I have never been to Mexico myself. But again, like what Sungseok On is doing, right? In our first photograph of that monument in South Korea, it's a portal to past times.
Yes.
Whereas Sungseok On really wanted us to think about the historical and political aspects of time, right? And of a city. I wonder what the narrative for the character is here.
Yeah.
And I want to know more, like, I mean, and we do know more, right? Like we can glean some information about this individual's life, but I always wonder, like, where are they now, right? Do they miss these images? Like, do they know it's being recontextualized by, a completely different artist? And one of the things that I really appreciate from Steph's description is, before Steph described this, I didn't even pay attention to this part. But one thing that is strikingly different
The
between
sky.
these two images is the sky. Absolutely. Like the sky is a beautiful blue. And again, it could just be like lighting conditions. But in the more contemporary image, it's pretty smoggy. It's
Yeah.
pretty gray, right?
It's done on purpose for sure.
Yeah, so I really like the use of light. I think light is also a very interesting concept because of its relationship with time. That even though, for tech noir, this 1980s, 1990s time has passed already, but it's still the same light that we see, right? Because light doesn't really expire, light doesn't really go anywhere. It comes back and it illuminates. So that's one thing that has stayed. And yeah, it's really, really cool. There is a sense of mystery in it, but I wonder, what the story is. And I wonder if they know that they are now in downtown Vancouver,
Can
part
you
of an exhibition.
can you imagine just like being in a place in time and walking past this and going, "Hey, that's my nephew." You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like that.
Yeah, exactly. Like it's like, what is familiar about this, right? And the fact that there's so much flora and fauna in the series as well. I know we pay attention to the individual because they are the most mysterious character here. But I wonder if anybody says, "Oh, I remember that gardens used to look like this in Mexico," right? Or like, this looks very, very familiar. I do want to note one thing, though, if anyone is very familiar with Mexico in our group tonight, that the title of the work has those letters that I read out, and the SLP, I believe, stands for San Luis Potosi, and HGO stands for Hidalgo, and those are just geographic locations in Mexico. So I'm guessing this is, this garden and the backyard that we see here in these images are probably from that city. So at least we have that idea.
Yeah. There's one interesting thing to me, and this is I think a trick of my partial, but for me it looks real.
Yeah.
The portrait in the top left corner has a tree behind a fence. And in the framed photo, there is a tree in the background that kind of looks like it extends from the portrait.
Yes, that's a
Looks like
really,
it could
really
be
good catch.
one tree, like the artist has matched them up to almost look like it could be one tree.
Yeah, that is a really, really good
With
catch.
two different skies. Yeah.
Yeah, and what's also interesting is the fencing that Steph talked about in the older work here of the mystery person. The fencing, the way that the lines are receding into the background.
Does it line up too?
Yeah, it also lines
Oh,
up with the fencing wall that we see in like the gray skied image. So
that's cool.
yeah, so again, right? Like it doesn't line up as meticulously, I think, as some of Sungseok On's works, but I think that is a choice, right? Not everything lines up. We can't converge everyone's stories and experiences, and I think maybe that's a choice by Gonzalo. Yeah.
Right.
But again,
that they could be similar places.
yeah, it's similar, but maybe slightly asks you to think and contemplate a bit more. Yeah.
Yeah. How cool.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Amy.
This is fun. I always learn so much about this stuff. I'm a photographer that points and clicks, and that's all I do. So this is always fascinating to me, and it challenges me to think about what I could do. And I love this layering idea, because I have a box of old family photos that I don't know what to do with. And so it gets my sort of juices flowing about different projects I could potentially do, if only one had enough hours in the day to do everything, right? Because I'm sensing that to do this kind of work takes like a lot of planning and thinking and being meticulous, because you either have these photos, like the artist has these existing photos and he's matching them, or he's taking these old archived photos and he's going out in the world and he's going, oh, here's a place I can match it with, click, 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 right? And then you know, you can go into Photoshops and all these kinds of cool programs and change photos and do things to line them up, which is way beyond my capacity in terms of accessibility, or just comprehension. To be honest. So
yeah, but Amy, I still think that when you we're talking about, you know, the family photos that you have and the ideas that you have, I think you really hit the nail on the head, because I think that's exactly what this exhibition is asking us to think about, right? How time in its various in instances and symbols can be played with in different ways and shaped in different ways by the decisions that you make when you make a work of art. And I really appreciate that.
Yeah. All right, Sarah, this has been fun.
Yes.
I guess we can take down this PowerPoint now, unless you have any last thoughts on this photo.
No, I totally agree with you. It's been really, really fun. And I really appreciate you like having this discussion with me, because so many times I was like, oh my God, that's also new, right? Like that helps me to totally reimagine what I thought. So I really appreciate it. Yeah.
Okay. So I guess, you know, we got some folks in here that may have some questions or thoughts, or want to share, I don't know, things that they've learned or whatnot in the space. So I want to just make sure that people know that they're invited to use that raise the hand function and ask Sarah questions. I don't know if we still have Emmy with us. I think we do. Yeah, I think Emmy's with us. So Emmy, you're welcome to come in and join us if you want to, and have a conversation between you, Sarah, and I, and wait and see if we have any questions, or you're welcome to just sit back and be called upon. You decide, you come in and let us know. Oh,
hi, here I am.
Got a square. So why don't we spotlight Emmy? So we got the three of us going, and we can just chit chat. And if there are any questions, friends, use that raise the hand. And
sorry, I'm on an iPad, so I'm just trying to hold it steady. But I just want to say how illuminating that was, even for me, even though I worked on the show, and just like sort of listening and watching you guys describe just brought out so many details that I hadn't really noticed before. And I love listening to the conversation. So thank you so much.
What
really
stood out
fascinating for me. Pardon me?
What stood out for you?
Well, I was actually thinking about, you know, when you were talking about Gonzalo's work towards the end and the kind of journey of finding those pictures, and you know, you were even talking about the legal implications, and just the way you described everything, like you know, it was just a fascinating conversation for me. And the questions you were asking were really insightful. So yeah, it was very interesting for me to listen to as well.
Thank you.
We've got a hand from Tilo. Come on in, Tilo. While we're waiting for Tilo, Sarah started to mention that some of the exhibitions will go through to May and June.
Hello. This one, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, now we got Tilo. I'll come back to that. Come on in, Tilo.
Okay. You guys were talking about the place and where the Berlin Wall was, and it's not there anymore. After the wall came down, and because my father was from Germany, and that he moved to Canada and that, but I actually got when the wall came down, one of my sisters were in Germany, and she saw the group Pink Floyd when they're actually taking the wall down, that concert. But she went and bought some pieces of the Berlin Wall and brought it back. So I actually have two pieces of the Berlin Wall, of the history of that.
Pretty cool.
So that's my take, and I like these photographs, a little different, and I never thought about taking another photograph and merging it into another one. And I'm sure, as far as the legal part, if they've been sold to a bookstore, the bookstore has the right, and I guess the person anymore gave up the rights to those pictures. If it's in the past, if it's Nan's sister of one of those pictures, I guess they would have to go through the courts and have that decide itself.
That could be a
So-
precedent-setting case right there, Tilo.
I mean,
Yeah.
there's a lot of artists actually that use artwork made by other people,
Yeah.
and that's called appropriation. And so there's like a long history of that practice.
Ah.
One thing I will say is that when people argue about this in court or legally, they sort of talk about whether the artwork has had substantive alteration to it.
Yep.
And in this instance, because the images are layered and effectively creating a new image, I think it would be there would be a strong argument that it's that the artist Gonzalo has created an entirely new artwork using the old image.
I think that you're probably right about that.
Yeah, I believe so.
Thanks,
Thank
Tilo.
you anyways. You're
Thanks.
welcome.
Thanks, Tilo.
Come on in, Rita.
Okay. Okay. So I had a few comments actually. I really enjoyed the historical things, like thinking about the whole situation in Korea, and then the Berlin Wall. I was alive when the Berlin Wall came down, and all the things that you hear about and how they represented it with the cross stitching. That was quite interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Now I wanted to make a comment about the Turkish thing, since I come from Turkey. And it is true that the LGBTQ community, there have been a lot of singers and actors that have been from the LGBTQ community. And somehow people don't seem to be bothered by that. But that doesn't mean that legally, if you're a famous guy, people might smile about it and they say, okay, he's good. He's, whatever, his interests are different and that kind of thing. His approach is different to life. But I don't think the government would be that lenient about it. So, if they, this guy is now, I think you said, living in Holland or somewhere. And anyway, so they've done well to get out of there and be safe. So anyway, but that it's just a comment that you made about the approach to LGBTQ artists, and that is true, and it's quite accepted.
Yeah, they just don't have the same legal rights, I guess.
No,
Yeah.
exactly.
The laws
So,
updated. Yep, that makes sense. We tend to give celebrities more breadth.
Yeah.
Somehow.
yeah, I think so. I mean, there was, when I was a kid, one of the most famous singers was, he was a gay man kind of thing. In fact, I think, anyway, but there have been a lot of them.
Mm-hmm.
And I just remember them, the really famous ones.
Yeah.
So.
Thank you for sharing that history, Rita.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, wonderful. So I was asking you before about the different exhibitions that will still be open or what's closing. Can we reflect?
Oh yeah, so this exhibition is actually still on until I think it's the 3rd of May, the next Saturday. And we actually have a panel discussion with some of the artists happening on Saturday at noon if you want to zoom in for that. And then there's lots of other exhibitions that continue. For example, the Pussy Riot show at the Polygon, the CAG exhibition, which is a film, comes down on the 3rd as well. But there's lots of public art projects that'll be on throughout the month of May. And in fact, the Canada Line stations will be on until September. So there's lots to check out still if you haven't had a chance to get out yet.
We'll have to be traveling with our sighted companions so they can point stuff out to
Yeah.
us. Because I'll walk right past public art and not even know it's there. But it's good to know that these things are kind of like phased. I don't know that not everything shuts down at once, but there's kind of a phased maybe approach to
Yeah, and I think also it could be interesting to zoom in. We have a Zoom option for a talk that we're doing on the 28th, which is Sunday, with Ava Respini, who is the new Deputy Director and Director of Curatorial Programs at the Vancouver Art Gallery. She's going to talk about maybe around 10 works from the collection of the Vancouver Art Gallery that she's found personally significant, and it'll be a really interesting opportunity for people to learn not only more about the collection, but also works that this internationally renowned curator has found really exciting.
Oh, that's great. We got a hand from Susan. Come on in, Susan.
Hi there.
Good evening.
Hey, you can hear me. I wanted to say Steph's descriptions were really great. I love photography, but as you know, partially sighted, I peer at pictures, or I peer at the iPad as I'm looking at them tonight. And then Steph's description is like, oh yes, okay, didn't see that. The fence, or just something that was not clear to me. So it really added. And Sarah, I really enjoyed all your contextual history and descriptions of the works. There was the very last one. Here's my vision. I'm looking at that portrait of the person in the middle, and I just assumed it was a woman. And when Steph described the person, she described him as a man, bare-chested. And so I started really peering at it. Why did I think it was a woman? And is it a woman or a man? And I just wonder if the artist. I just think the gender might be ambiguous and not necessarily clearly a man or a woman, maybe a trans. The person has long hair, and the face, I don't think it's that clear whether it's a man or a woman. So it was just, that was one description where I was like, what? That's not how I saw it.
I'm guessing there's something probably about the chest that makes it obvious, but I don't know.
Well, yes, yeah. And then I thought, okay, but not necessarily, that could be someone who's trans, and maybe that picture was taken a generation ago, I guess, which is funny to hear because I was an adult then. And now I think, I don't know if we would assume that is a man or a woman or yeah.
Well, the interesting thing about that series is he actually found several photographs in a box in a bookstore in Mexico City. And actually, a lot of them are dated. And in the earlier pictures, the main protagonist has a more conservative look. So his hair is shorter, he's dressed a little bit more conservatively. And over the course of maybe the 6 years that the photographs document, his hair grows longer, he dresses a little bit more flamboyantly, his gender becomes a bit more ambiguous. So you've actually really hit on something, like by looking at that one photograph a little bit more closely, that gender is a huge part of what I think the artist who happens to be gay is playing with.
Yeah, that's what I wondered. Yeah, thanks for that. That. Yeah, and I also enjoyed the layering. Like you, Amy, I'm like, I wonder what photographs I have and what I could do with them. But also, like you, I know how really inaccessible the app, going in and trying to edit and professionally layer a photograph, I think would be next to impossible. I've tried. It's a mess.
I'd have to pair myself up with a photography expert and technical stuff.
Yeah, I think so. Like you can't zoom in to Photoshop, right? There's so much on the screen. Yeah.
One day, Susan, one day, this will
Yeah.
be accessible for us. Thanks for sharing those thoughts. I appreciate that.
Thank you, Susan.
And Rita's got a hand again.
Thank you.
Hey,
Again,
Rita.
yes,
Yeah,
I have
go
a
on in.
question for Sarah, actually, Sarah.
Okay, hello.
So what I wanted to find out is, I think you said that there were groups of these photographs or pictures or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So, like for instance, let's say the guy that did the Korean thing, the
Yes.
first picture,
Mm-hmm.
did he have a whole series about Korea? Or the person that did the German, the Berlin Wall, did they have a whole bunch of pictures about the Berlin Wall or Germany or something?
Yeah, so
So,
that's great question. And I think Emmy could also speak a lot more to this as well. But from what I know, for the first Sungseok on, when we talked about the Korean monuments, in the series that is part of the exhibition for Capture Photography Festival, there were 3 images, and we chose one. I'm not sure if the entire series is larger than that, but I can tell you for the German one, we had I believe 5 or 6 images, but again, we chose one for tonight. But the entire Berlin series is about like 40 some images. So only a handful of the 40 some came here to Vancouver, and we chose one. Emmy, is that correct?
I don't remember exactly how many, but there's maybe, I think, 5 images in the exhibition, and then we just chose one of them for the for this presentation. But they all are very similar in the sense of like they are all images shot along the Berlin Wall, and then they're all hand stitched. They're actually like hand embroidered
They are
images.
hand embroidered.
Wow. Oh my
Wow.
goodness.
okay.
That is
Wow.
So it's sort of telling you a story about that time period or something,
Yeah, and
right?
I just want to say that for Sungseok On's series, not all of the works are about the city of Seoul. The one that we looked at tonight is in Seoul, but there's another work that is in another city. I believe it's called Cheonan. So for that we do move around South Korea. For
Right.
Berlin,
I see.
we see lots of Berlin, but we're still within that one city.
Right. Okay. Okay. Thanks.
Thank you.
It's a great question. Great question. So with the festival, the capture photography part of the festival coming, I guess, to a close at the end of April, what are you all looking forward to? Are there parties coming up? Are there? I know you talked about some panels and some.
Well, actually, their big kind of closing event is the talk at the Vancouver Art Gallery with Ava Spini that I just mentioned.
Yep.
We have a bit of a closing reception around that. And then right after that, I'm going to contact Photography Festival in Toronto to check out some other photo-based works. Yeah, and then I think my team everybody probably needs a little bit of a break, to be honest, because it's just a lot to do in the span of a month. It's been really enjoyable, and I was just thinking the other day, my cup feels very full. Like I feel like I've had so many interesting conversations with people, listened to so many fascinating artists speak, and like it's been a real joy. But I also think like everybody needs a little bit of a break before we launch into 2025.
Are you able to share with us what the theme is for 2025, or is that like under wraps?
It's not there's no overarching theme, but one show that Chelsea and I, who's the assistant curator who worked on this project that we discussed tonight, we're working on a show around photography and textiles. So very similar to the Diane Meyer work that we saw with the Berlin Wall, where there was like hand stitching. So this idea that textiles and craft and embroidery and that kind of work has often been relegated to the realm of craft. So, kind of separated from what is considered art with a capital A, and just kind of merging those fields together because we're noticing a lot of lens-based practitioners that happen to be women are bringing together fabric and textiles, sewing, that kind of material with photography. And we sort of want to explore that intersection a little bit more.
I think that's super cool.
It's really interesting. Yeah.
Awesome. I'm excited about where this goes next for year 12. I'm also happy that you all are going to take a little bit of time off, because I think that is necessary to recharge the batteries, even though you've already started on the process a little bit. It's nice to just have a little resting time, little family time, little, me time, whatever that looks like for you.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, we're really looking forward to both the next couple events that are coming up. We have this panel discussion on Saturday, and then also this talk with Ava on Sunday, which will be really exciting for us. But thank you for your well wishes. And I always enjoy this every year. It's like actually fascinating for me to like listen to you guys describe in such incredible detail, but it's also done with such care and precision, and leaves a lot of space for kind of interpretation. It's just really evocative, which I really appreciate.
Thanks, Emmy. I appreciate that. With that, I would love to wish you both a wonderful evening, the best of success for the rest of the festival, whatever that looks like. Success is marked in many ways, and I think just the fact that people are enjoying it, the fact that you can reach audiences like ours in this space, marks success in and of itself, right? The fact that you don't charge people to come into spaces is important. Oh, and I see another hand. There's just been a hand popped up. We got time for one more hand? I think that's Sheila.
Sure.
Come on in, Sheila.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Oh, thank you. I don't know. His eyesight is going crazy on me. Anyways, I wanted to know if I want to see the other photos for the first description we had. How do I go around to see them?
So I didn't quite hear the question. Can you repeat that, or did one of you hear it, Amy or Sarah?
Yeah.
The other photos from the artist that did the Korean photo. The other two.
The which photo?
The one from South Korea.
Oh yeah. So Sungseok on. Emmy, are we able to share that image?
The other photos in the exhibition. I mean, if you want to send your email to Amy, then we'd be happy to send you some other images of the of that series.
Oh, so Amy does have my email, so
okay,
would
great.
that be possible?
Yes, absolutely, for sure. Well, Amy, if you could just connect.
And the Berlin wall as well. Okay.
Sure. Amy, if you could
Okay,
just
great.
connect with Sarah, then we'll send images your way.
Sure.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Yep.
Thank you.
All right. There we go. Well, friends, with that, I will offer you a thank you for that offer, and an enjoyable evening ahead. And I hope that that the rest of the festival goes really, really well.
Thank you so much, Amy, and thank you to Steph too, and everybody on the back end.
Thank
Okay,
you.
bye guys. Thanks,
Have a
Sarah.
good night.
Have a
Bye.
lovely
Bye,
night.
Abby. Bye, Amy.
Have a great night.
VocalEye, vocaleye.ca. Special thanks to our funders, the Canada Council for the Arts, the British Columbia Arts Council, the Province of British Columbia, and the City of Vancouver.